The Pledge of Allegiance this morning will be led by David Caravo, Kyla Moran, Kimberly Acosta, and Christian Avila from Denver Urban Scholars.
Please join us for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hold on, guys. Mr. Roll Kohler, please take the roll.
Representatives Becker.
Christian.
Buck. Buckner. Conti.
Did we? Okay, we'll get it.
Corum. Court. Del Grosso. Dorr.
Let's get a picture.
Duran. Everett. Exum. Fields. Fisher. Foote. Garcia. Gardner. Giroux. Janal. Hamner. Representative Hamner. Holbert. Hollinghorse. Here somewhere. Humphrey. Joshi. Kagan. Krafttharp. Labuda. Landgraf. Lawrence. I got you. Lebsock. Lee. May. McCann. Representative McCann.
Absent.
Absent. McLaughlin. McNulty.
How are you this morning, Corey?
I thought you were. I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you. How was your weekend?
That was good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Please continue with the roll and stop the banter with
Melton.
Representative McNulty.
Mitch Bush. Moreno. Murray. Navarro. Nordberg. Pabon. Representative Pabon. Absent. Peniston. Pedersen. Representative McCann is present. Pedersen. Primavera. Priola. Rankin. Representative Pabon is present. Rosenthal. Ryden. Sane. Representative Sane. I got her. Salazar. Schaefer. Representative Schaefer. Absent. Scott. Singer. Sonnenberg. Stevens. Swam. Zabo. Tyler. Vigil. Waller. Williams. Wilson. Wright. Young. Speaker Ferrandino.
I'm sorry, I'm an old lady. That's a little too far.
She's here. We got 65. What? She's here. 65.
65? Okay. With 65 members present, a quorum is present. Representative Dorr from the back of the room. No fine today, but we'll be doing this all week, Representative Dorr. Same relative time, same place. So it better be good for the anticipation we have.
I don't know about that. I might disappoint in that.
Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the reading of the Journal of April 25th.
That would be correct.
Be dispensed with and be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The noes have lost. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Announcements and introductions. Representative Hamner? And the Capitol Choir, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, while Representative Dorr was up here doing that fabulous motion, I wanted to call the Capitol Choir down because it is his birthday today. Did you know that? How do you like that? Where's our Capitol Choir? We ready?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Representative Dorr. Happy birthday to you.
If I knew it was your birthday before, I would have made you read the journal as your present. No reconsideration. Representative Swam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, as a sort of last hurrah for one of your colleagues who is term limited and will be out of here soon.
Members, I can't even hear Representative Swam.
And it's important that you hear me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, it's my great pleasure, actually, to introduce two members of my family today who actually have done a great job. Actually, there's three, but I'll explain that in a moment. First, I want to introduce my wife, Marlene. And for those of you who know, this is to be a spouse for one of us is a long-suffering, kind of thankless thing. So thank you, Marlene. And second, my daughter, Lauren. She actually lives here, and why I said a third, she is actually expecting our first grandchild about the 1st of August. So we are very excited about that, and believe it or not, I will have something to do when I'm done here. So,
Perfect
members,
timing.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Representative Swan. Representative Sonnenberg. And Janal, if she gets down here in time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wanted to make sure that you know today is Bikers Day at the Capitol, and we have people that will be showing up. There will be lunch outside. And so that I don't do all the talking, I'm going to quit there and let Representative Janal finish up.
Thank you, Representative Sonnenberg. The bikers will be at the Capitol today from 11 to 2, and go grab lunch, talk to them about motorcycle safety, because it's not just about the people on the motorcycles, it's about everyone driving and making sure that you are looking out for those that are riding their motorcycles out there. So come and join us on the west steps of the Capitol at 11 o'clock and join us for lunch. Thank you.
Representative Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to emphasize the join for lunch. You have an opportunity to sit with these guys that ride all the time, that look for safety on the road. Tiger has been so helpful with this program for a number of years now and bringing it to the Capitol. Please make it a priority to at least stop by and say hello today during the lunch hour. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Coyle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This is somewhat between an announcement and a personal privilege. As you all know, I sat in the second row next to Representative McNulty, and sometimes it makes me very nervous. Also, as you all know, I truly love and respect our Chief Clerk, Marilyn. And so Marilyn and I got together and talked about, for our own safety, we have actually, Marilyn has something to present to Representative McNulty. Please go see Marilyn. It's a sippy cup.
That will help him immensely.
What do you want me to do with this?
You can put any clear liquid in there, Representative McNulty. Or Representative Conti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, please help me give a warm welcome this morning to Peabody Elementary up in the gallery. They are here under the direction of Melanie Burke from Centennial, Colorado. Welcome.
Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to introduce Giselle Silva, her mother Karina, and her sister Sierra. Giselle attends Park View Elementary in Lamar, Colorado, and she just received the award for an art project she did for Arbor Day. So she's over there. The award is actually on the project she did is on my desk. If you get a chance, stop by and look at it. I want to welcome her to the chamber.
Representative Kagan.
Members of the Judiciary Committee and of the public, Senate Bill 176 concerning chop shops is going to be heard in Judiciary Committee tomorrow afternoon. Senate Bill 176.
Representative Court.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, health fair. The state is sponsoring a health fair tomorrow, Tuesday, April 29th from 9 to 3, and it's over at the Ralph Carr Building. We want to encourage all state employees, and our aides are also eligible to go. So this is a really good opportunity for some screenings, 9 to 3 tomorrow, Tuesday, over at the Ralph Carr Building. Go be healthy.
Representative McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the Health Insurance and Environment Committee, we are adding another bill for tomorrow. That will be Senate Bill 14-187 by Representatives Stevens and Schaefer, the Colorado Commission on Affordable Health Care. So we'll hear that tomorrow on adjournment.
Representative Fisher. Members, can we have your attention?
Members, could I have your attention, please? This is a special announcement that I want to make today, a special introduction. Please think back to March 26th when the Colorado State Capitol hosted the 3rd annual Farm to Fork Culinary Competition as part of Colorado Agriculture Day. I'm sure many of you here went down and enjoyed the special dishes that were prepared by some of Colorado's celebrity chefs, and recognize that the competition this year utilized all Colorado ingredients to craft culinary delights. And while these participants were competing in the competition, they were actually also serving up to 500 people that work in the Capitol. This Colorado Ag Day has really become a celebration of Colorado agriculture, and it's organized by the Colorado Ag Council as well as the Colorado Chefs Association. This year's competition highlighted Colorado eggs, potatoes, onions, dairy, wheat, beef, lamb, bison, and pork. And all the while this is going on, it also highlights the Agriculture Council's donation of $973,000 of financial and in-kind donations to Feeding Colorado, which is an umbrella organization that donates to food banks around the state. The culinary competition represents a partnership between farmers, legislators, and chefs working together to feed Coloradans across the state. And it's really great. I'm proud that the Colorado General Assembly has those chefs that participated in the competition this year in the chambers. Members, would you help me recognize, after I've introduced them all, the chefs that participated in this year's Ag Day Farm to Fork Culinary Competition. We have Robert Holloway from McCoy's Restaurant in Denver, Danny Flanagan and Rhett Montague from the Sanctuary Golf Course, Jason Morse, Douglas County School District, Jeff Cook, Metro State University, Michael Long, radio host, the Main Course, Klaus Krebs, the Isle of Capri at Blackhawk, and Peter Dolan of the Sink in Boulder. Please help me recognize them and welcome them to the chambers.
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members, for that enthusiastic welcome. And just Wanted to say also that we have tributes that have been prepared for each of the chefs that participated this year. They're in the process of being signed over in the Senate, and when you gentlemen go over to the Senate, you'll receive your tributes over there, I hope. So thank you again for participating in this event, feeding so many people here at the Capitol, and for all the work that you do to help support and celebrate agriculture.
Thank you, Representative Fisher, and thank you to the chefs for our wonderful meal we had about a week or two ago. Further announcements and introductions. Representative Kraft-Tharp.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, please help me welcome two groups of fourth graders from Foster Elementary, and I think that's who might have just been walking out a moment ago. But can we all say welcome and thanks for coming?
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Appropriations Committee is meeting at noon, and there's going to be one bill that will be added to our calendar. It's a JBC bill, House Bill 1394.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, if I can have your attention just for a moment, I would like to share with you some news that...
Hold on. Members, can we have your attention? Thank you. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, for those of you who have served or know Senator Regis Groff, who served in this chamber and in the Senate from 1975 to 1994, Senator Groff has fallen gravely ill. And I found out this news this weekend, and so I just want to ask you to please keep Senator Regis Groff in your prayers during this time in which he's going through this illness. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Any further announcements or introductions? Seeing none, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House proceed out of order for consideration of third reading of bills, final passage.
Seeing no objection, the House will proceed out of order for consideration of third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1374.
House Bill 1374 by Representatives Holbert and Kraft-Tharp, also Senators Hodge and Sheffield, concerning the inclusion of on-demand air carriers in the sales and use tax exemption for certain aircraft.
Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With appreciation to my good friend, Representative Kraft-Tharp, I move House Bill 1374 on third reading and final passage.
Any further discussion? Okay. Seeing none, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1374 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Humphrey. Close the machine. With 64 aye vote, 1 no vote, 0 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1374 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1379.
House Bill 1379 by Representative McCann, also Senator Kirk, concerning clarifying the application of spousal maintenance statutes.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1379 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1379 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buckner, Dorr, Gardner, McNulty, Priola, and Stephen. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 1 no vote, it's a trend, 0 excused and 0 absent, House Bill 1379 is passed. Co-sponsors. You were not the no vote on the last one. We're 64 and 1. We'll see if we keep that the entire day. Doubt it. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1378.
House Bill 1378 by Representatives Stevens and Pabon, also Senators King and Hodge, concerning prohibiting posting a private image on social media without consent to cause serious emotional distress.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1378 on third reading and final passage.
Members, get ready. Representative Stevens, for your final one, I believe.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for a third reading amendment. Ask that it be posted.
Would you like to ask for permission?
Yes, and permission to have this shown, please.
Or to offer it, yes.
Yes, and to offer. And to do anything else that's appropriate at this time.
Sounds perfect, Representative Stevens.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our friend Michael Dorr showed up this morning and said that we had a punctuation problem in the bill and that we had to fix it immediatamente. So, members, with that, I move this third reading amendment and ask that you approve it and allow me to do whatever else we have to do today. To do
Okay.
this.
The question before the House is to grant Representative Stevens permission to offer a third reading amendment. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Stevens, you voted no on permission. You can if you want. You might lose it now. Okay. Didn't change. Close the machine. With 62 aye votes, 3 no votes, including the person who asked for permission, 0 excused and 0 absent. Representative Stevens granted permission to offer a third reading amendment. Representative Stevens, can you move your amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move Amendment L017 and ask that we accept it. Members, I don't even know what Michael Dorr did. I'm pretty sure he probably put another apostrophe in here somewhere, said that we had a punctuation problem. So with that, I move L017 and ask for its approval.
Any discussion? Seeing none, the question for the House is the passage of Amendment 17 to House Bill 1378. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. We're voting on the amendment that Representative Stevens voted against giving her permission for. Representative Janal. Close the machine. We are getting a trend. With 64 aye votes, 1 no vote, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Amendment 17 is passed. We're back to the underlying motion. Question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1378 on third reading and final passage as amended. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Okay. It's okay. Okay. Close the machine with 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1378 as amended is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1386.
House Bill 1386 by Representatives Kraft, Tharp, and Gardner, also Senators Johnston and Hill, concerning conforming definitions in Section 2765102 CRS, Task Force recommendations.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1386 on third reading and final passage.
Representative Humphrey.
Members, I rise in opposition to this bill. I understand the intent, but I'm just very concerned about people's civil liberties, particularly with the imminent language being removed from Section 105 in the last section of this bill. I'm also very concerned that a member of the task force came down and testified, and I won't say his name because I'll butcher it. I forgot how to pronounce it. But a member of the task force came down and said that this actually wasn't a recommendation of the task force to remove the word imminent. So I'm very concerned about that because that's in the title of the bill. So I have asked for a no vote.
Is there further discussion? Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also urge a no vote on this bill. I'm also concerned about some of the definitions that have been changed, particularly on recently, which is an undefined term, especially if they've been seeking help for depression. This bill could actually have an opposite effect for people who may need to seek help, especially veterans or other folks that may actually have a need for treatment. This will put a stigma on them, and this industry already has a stigma. So I would urge a no vote on this bill. It's well-intentioned, however, I think it could have unintended consequences. Thank you.
Representative Everett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also urge a no vote on this bill. I think that a lot of the stakeholders weren't included in this, including law enforcement, which I think was very important. Also, the Second Amendment community, we think that we want to consult all different communities out there, especially after we had 2.5 recalls this last cycle.
Representative Everett. Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. I, like you, received a large number of emails about House Bill 1386 over the weekend, most of which simply did not understand the bill. First of all, this bill, House Bill 1386, on which I appear as a co-prime, does not address the rights of the owners of guns in Colorado at all. Now, will gun owners be affected in the same way that automobile owners and people who have drugs in their medicine cabinets and razor blades there, and on and on and on? This bill has nothing in it about guns. This bill is a very narrow bill to change the definitions and refine them for civil commitments. Now, as Representative Humphrey says, a member of the commission or the task force came in and said this wasn't a recommendation. There seems to be a lot of disagreement about whether this was a recommendation of the task force or not. And I was taken to task by someone over the email saying, well, if the task force didn't do this, Representative Gardner, how can you stay on the bill? Well, I want to say this carefully. I've been here 8 years, and I've seen a lot of task forces and working groups and this and that and the other. My tendency is to try to make up my mind when I have some expertise, make up my mind what I think about things independent of task forces and all. Those things can be persuasive. My carrying of this bill has its source in my experience in dealing with people, in some cases, in my own case, a family member, with mental illness, and what it requires for them to get the help that they need. Now, the refinement here is, in one case, to remove the word imminent danger from the bill, because it's both, as I said in committee, both under and over-inclusive as to who might or might not get committed. My friend and colleague, Representative Singer, was eloquent in committee, and I hope I can do what you said, Representative Singer, justice by saying, you know, the worst deprivation of civil liberties is failing to provide help to someone who needs it, who ends up injuring themselves, taking their life, or taking the life of a family member. So for those of you who came down and said, well, I'm concerned about civil liberties, I know you didn't mean to imply this, and you certainly didn't say it. Just understand that I have always, in my 8 years here, prided myself on my own concern for civil liberties. It's why I struggled through law school twice, was because I care about those things. But as Representative Singer says, if we fail to get the help to those who need it, and they harm themselves or they harm a family member, we've done them no service by not putting them on a 72-hour hold. And that
is the question and the issue. So, members, having due concern for those issues, knowing that anytime you have a legal standard, you're going to have some difficulty. Right now, what we have is difficulty of getting help for those who need it. This, I believe, and I believe in my heart. You can tell me I'm wrong, and that's okay. That's what this process is about. But I believe in my heart that this is the right approach. It is the prevailing approach across the states and our union now. And for that reason, I would ask you for a very thoughtful and difficult, because it is not easy for any of us when we make these choices, a very thoughtful aye vote. Thank you.
Representative Kraft Tharp.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Gardner. And Representative Gardner, thank you for letting me co-prime this bill with you. It's been an honor, and I have found you to be very eloquent and thoughtful. Members, I'm asking for your support of this bill. This is not the first time that we've considered this issue. Last year, there was an extensive stakeholder process that resulted in House Bill 1296, in which we brought to you these definitions. What this legislature said was we wanted the Civil Commitment Task Force to re-look at these definitions, which they did. These, as Representative Gardner said, this is a difficult decision. This is about helping those who need help in involuntarily civil commitment. This is a very narrow focus. I ask for your support. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1386 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Coram and Pabon. Close the machine. With 43 aye votes, 22 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1386 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1390.
House Bill 1390 by Representatives Duran and Gardner, also Senators Brophy and Zenzinger, concerning the legal standing of a member of the public and challenging a violation of the open meetings requirements.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1390 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1390 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Singer. Close the machine. With 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1390 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1388.
House Bill 1388 by Representatives Foote and Pedersen, also Senator Stedman, concerning a civil cause of action for damages that result from unlawful termination of pregnancy at any time prior to birth caused by at least reckless conduct without establishing a legal person at any time prior to a live birth.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1388 on third reading and final passage.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we had a robust debate on this bill on Friday, and so I will not spend a long time. I will be a no vote on this bill. I believe that this bill does not provide any remedy to a pregnant woman who loses her unborn child as a result of intentional or reckless acts. It does not provide any remedy that does not already exist in law. But this bill does negate the idea that that unborn child is a person at any time, not simply at conception, not before implantation, at any time before birth. And it negates that in a way that it's not necessary to do, and it makes one wonder whether the bill has any effect other than that at all. And for that reason, I will be a no vote.
Representative Foote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we ask for a yes vote on this bill. This bill does one thing and one thing only. It creates a remedy where one does not exist at this point for intentional, knowing, and reckless conduct that causes an unlawful termination of pregnancy. That does not exist, and if this bill passes, it will exist. And these things, unfortunately, do happen. Very rare and very tragic circumstances, they do happen. If there is an intentional or knowing or reckless act, it causes an unlawful termination of pregnancy, then there is no civil remedy. The woman cannot recover for that particular act. And that's what this bill proposes to do and will do if it's passed. And it does it without creating personhood and assigning the value of personhood to this remedy. And this is important to us as sponsors. And it's important that we're as clear as possible that that's our intent, because as many of you probably heard, on Friday we debated this particular clause for about an hour or so, and we want to make sure that it's clear and that the courts interpreting it would be clear, and that's why we wrote the language that we did. The exact same language, by the way, that is assigned to the Crimes Against Pregnant Women bill that passed last year. So we would ask for your support. Thank you.
Representative Waller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, you know, I appreciate Representative Foote coming down here and trying to boil this bill down to just one thing or one simple thing. But the reality is it doesn't do that. It does several things. Now, whether those consequences are intended or unintended, they're still there. It does stuff. It does lots of stuff. Number one, this bill protects abortion butchers like Kermit Gosnell. That's the number one thing that this bill does. It provides immunity from liability for butchers like Kermit Gosnell in these circumstances. This bill does that. We can come down here and say it only does one thing until we're blue in the face. But the reality is there's a very specific provision in this bill that says if you're a health care provider providing health care to a woman with her consent, you're immune from liability. It doesn't say providing legal health care to a woman. It just says providing health care to a woman. Now, proponents for the bill have come down and argued that those actions have to be legal. This bill doesn't say that. Leaves it certainly at a minimum, at a bare minimum, open for litigation, which is a place I don't think we want to be. I don't think we want to be able to even create the argument for an abortion butcher like Kermit Gosnell. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that the law is perfectly clear that we are going to hold butchers like Kermit Gosnell accountable, whether it's criminally or civilly, for their actions. This bill does not do that. Make no mistake, Kermit Gosnell gets a free pass when it comes to civil remedies as a result of this piece of legislation. That's one. Two, the whole purpose of this bill is to create civil remedies for women who lose their unborn children. Or as the bill states, you know, to get away from controversy here, for women who lose their unborn human beings. Now, in order to be able to get non-economic damages in civil courts in the state of Colorado, you can get those for a few reasons. You can get it for pain and suffering, you can get it for loss, and you can get it for that pain and suffering related to an injury that happens to yourself, or you can get that pain and suffering and loss for injury that happens to one of your loved ones. So for example, if a husband is killed, a wife can then get pain and suffering related to the loss of the husband. That's current Colorado law. You know, if a husband is seriously maimed, in many cases a wife can get pain and suffering, loss of consortium related to the loss of the husband, related to the losses that the husband suffers. Law allows us to do that for losses of human beings. This bill very specifically says nothing in this section is going to be construed to confer personhood, which means that the loss of that unborn human being is no longer a loss the mother can recover for. So the mother can't recover for pain and suffering related to the loss of the unborn human being because the bill omits that. The bill says an unborn human being is not a human being. It says quite the opposite. It says it's not a human being at all. So no ability to claim loss that way. A mother who loses their unborn child can no longer claim loss related to, once again, pain and suffering, can no longer claim loss related to the love of that, or the loss of love of that unborn human being or that unborn child, because this bill very specifically says it's not a child. It's not a human being. Now, we heard during the debate, Representative McLaughlin came down here and said time and time and time again that under current Colorado law, a mother can claim non-economic damages for that loss of the unborn child. That's the current state of Colorado law. If you lose an unborn child, a mother can claim related to that loss. This bill is going to prevent that from happening. This bill is going to say you don't get to do that under this section of Colorado law. Now, maybe you can try to do it under another section of Colorado law, maybe under the wrongful death statute, but now putting it in law here makes it come into question in other areas of the law in Colorado statutes. So this is going to, at a minimum, cause confusion. And I fear it's actually going to make it more difficult at the end of the day for mothers to actually gain damages, civil damages, related to the loss of their unborn child. I think it's going to have the unintended consequence or the opposite effect of what the bill sponsors are looking for. The bill sponsors say this is to provide a civil remedy to these women, however, to these mothers who lose their unborn children. However, it's going to do the opposite when it comes to non-economic damages related to loss of their unborn children. And for that reason, I can't possibly be a yes vote on a bill that's actually going to make it more difficult for mothers to receive civil damages related to the loss of their unborn children.
Representative Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we had a long debate on this bill on Friday, and I am still opposed to the bill as written. And what I just heard earlier this morning when Representative Foote said the sponsors felt it was important to make sure that the personhood language was in this bill, that we not recognize that baby that's being carried as anything other than an embryo, something other than a child before it's born. As someone who's had 2 kids, you know, I can tell you that you don't talk about I'm carrying an embryo. You talk about I'm carrying a child. I'm so looking forward to when this baby's delivered. I'm so excited about the future that my family has because of this baby. And the fact that this bill says that no matter what time during that pregnancy, we will not recognize that medical condition that that woman has as carrying a baby, I think is insulting to all the women across this state who are pinning their hopes and dreams on that baby, who might have gone through medical procedures, in vitro fertilization, to finally get pregnant. And the fact that we are carrying this to such a degree that we will not acknowledge that a baby, moments away from delivery, is anything but a baby, is something that we need to think long and hard about. This is a blanket statement of putting a political statement in something that really shouldn't be there. If this is about civil damages that that woman can claim because her pregnancy was terminated through no fault of her own, then that's what this should be about. It shouldn't be about personhood. That language should not even be in this bill. Because what that does is it disenfranchises all those women across the state who are pregnant and waiting to deliver that baby. It's not a puppy or a kitten. It's a little boy or a little girl. So I want you to think about that. It's a little boy or a little girl. Please vote no on this bill. We can do better.
Madam Assistant Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And fellow members, I'm not an attorney like Representative Waller or Representative Gardner, but I am a mother. And that's the experience I can speak to about this. I was pregnant 4 times. I never once looked at that pregnancy as just a pregnancy. Every time I looked at it as an addition to the Szabo family. I looked at it as excitement, something that would be great for mankind and for our family. Never once did anyone ever come to me and say, Libby, when will your pregnancy end? Because they didn't look at it as just a pregnancy. They looked at it as a life, like you and I live every day. From the moment that they knew I was pregnant. I remember times, and I'm experiencing them right now, with my daughter. I'm going to be a grandmother in September. And her baby is starting to move. It's not her pregnancy moving. It's her baby. It's my grandchild. That's how everybody looks at this. This bill does not look at it that way, and that baffles me. One of the questions that you always get asked, are you going to find out if it's a boy or a girl? What are you having? I've never ever heard anybody say, I'm having some tissue and some cells. They either say, I'm going to wait until I have my baby, or my baby is a girl, or it's a boy. Boys and girls are human beings. This law does not recognize that. And like I said, I can't give you the legal arguments, pro or con on this. But I could give you the heartfelt arguments as a mom and a soon-to-be grandmother. That in the womb, these are actually babies. They are people. And when they go away because of an act of someone else, there's mourning that goes on. There's sadness. I have several friends who had miscarriages, and they grieved for months and months and months because they so wanted a baby. They didn't so want a pregnancy. For all of you that are out there and have had babies, you know that the pregnancy part isn't the part we all look forward to. We look forward to the baby and that addition to our family. So members, I would just ask that you would think about that and how important that is. Thank you.
Representative McNulty. Representative Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, members, I can't really add much to the eloquent words of the Assistant Minority Leader on this bill, but I am equally baffled by what this bill does. How can it be that I'm not going to call it a thing. How can it be that the person that my daughter, who I just introduced, is carrying anything other than a person? And beyond, it's not, it's a person. Now, she's chosen to take the route that they don't know. They've chosen not to find out the sex of this child. And we just I introduced my daughter to the clerk in the office back there, and Patricia, and she said, "Oh, that's exactly what we do." We did. It was so exciting. What is exciting? We were very excited when we learned that our daughter was pregnant with our first grandchild. And not only were we excited because it's our first grandchild, but let me tell you just a little bit more. Many, many people were praying for the birth or the conception of this child because they had a great deal of trouble conceiving this child. And I think they'd almost given up. And so the language just baffles me in this bill. We're talking about something other than a person. This is a person. And I don't want to, well, I'm just going to go ahead and say this, that what we do here in some ways is simply a reflection of our culture. As I put it sometimes, culture is the dog that wags the tail of politics. And it saddens me and alarms me to think that our culture has gotten to the point where we in this chamber, the politicians, can be doing something to degrade what my daughter is carrying right now. That we've so devalued what it means to be a person. And let me tell you something. I mean, when I hear about this bill, the thought of my daughter losing that child, well, I don't even want to think about it. And moreover, the thought of losing it to some intentional or maliciously reckless act that's being contemplated in this bill, I don't want to think about it. And I'm sure you don't either. You've had either your spouse, your wife, your daughters that have given birth to kids that the thought, putting yourself in the position of what's happened, is contemplated by this bill. That is terrifying. So, members, I'm baffled by this bill, and I certainly urge, I'm not going to vote for it. You can count on that, and I urge a no vote as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Foote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So first of all, members, what this bill does is it only expands what's available right now. It doesn't restrict anything. It doesn't contract what we have right now in the civil laws. You know, we went over this Gosnell example, hypothetical in judiciary for a long time. We went over it in second readings for a long time. And what I can tell you, and I'll tell you this confidently, that if something like Gosnell were to happen here in Colorado, then I guarantee you, if it happened in Boulder, I would be more than happy to prosecute Gosnell for what he did. And we have the laws to do that. If I go into civil practice, I'd be more than happy to file a wrongful death lawsuit against someone like Gosnell, because we will still have that when this bill passes, if it passes. I would be more than happy in civil practice to file a medical malpractice lawsuit against someone like Gosnell, because that will still exist if this bill passes. More than happy to file a lawsuit under this section if what somebody does is beyond the woman's consent in her medical care, because that will still exist if this bill passes. It all still exists. It all is still there. This bill adds. It does not subtract anything. And let me just make a clarification or a little bit more additional information about this personhood language. You know, as much as I guess maybe we could take credit for coming up with this personhood exclusion language that's in the bill, it's not unique to the bill. It came word for word from the Crimes Against Pregnant Women last year, a bill that got 50 votes in this chamber, which came word for word from House Bill 11-1256, which had Republican sponsors and co-sponsors. That's where the language came from. And to give you good, and that gives you good explanation of where this language comes from. It's not something we just came up with at this moment, members. It's language that's had support, and I hope it will have support today as well. Again, we ask for an aye vote.
Representative McNulty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that, Representative Foote, is the crux of this bill. You're referencing a criminal statute, and you reference multiple examples where the criminal law will take hold, and you will find no disagreement from any of the prosecutors, those who have served as prosecutors on my side of the aisle. This bill isn't about criminal penalties. This bill is about recovering civil damages. And this bill makes that harder. Wrongful death makes it harder. This bill makes it harder for expectant mothers whose child is unlawfully terminated to recover damages. That is the plain and simple truth of this bill. That is why the Gosnell example is so pertinent to this discussion. That's why it was a focal point, his horrible actions of that abortion doctor, abortionist, were the focal point of the conversation in Judiciary Committee and the conversation that we had here on second reading. This bill makes it harder for expectant mothers to seek and recover those civil damages for the loss of their child. And that's what's wrong with this bill. The fact that you cut and pasted language from a bill last year that had broad bipartisan support does not mean that you were right, Representative Foote. It simply means you were lazy.
Representative McNulty, that is...
What hurts about this bill, Mr. Speaker, is precisely that. What hurts about this bill is that we all agree. We all agree that women who are expecting children should have a free and clear path to recover civil damages if their child is unlawfully terminated, killed, murdered. We all agree to that point. But this isn't about that. This is not about allowing and clearing the path for expectant mothers to recover damages, Mr. Speaker. This is about politics. This is about mailers and television commercials.
McNulty, to the issues of the bill, and don't put motives behind the sponsors of the bill. You know that's out of the rules as a former speaker.
And this is about dividing the House of Representatives on an issue that ought to have clear bipartisan support. Now, I don't know how this vote's going to turn out. Because some on the Democratic side smell blood in the water on this
Representative
politically.
McNulty.
Mr. Speaker, it is interesting that you had the same conversation on Jessica's law at this same microphone, but I understand your perspective. I understand your perspective. I understand that you said the same thing about Senate Bill 2 at this same microphone. But I understand your perspective.
Anyone know what Senate Bill 2 is, so.
Having stood where you stood, I understand your perspective. But I also know this. A bill can be crafted that respects those of you who don't believe that that is a child growing inside that mother's womb, and for those of us who believe that that little thing is a child. Representative Gardner offered multiple opportunities for you, the Democratic majority, to craft that language that takes the politics out of this bill. But instead of taking the politics out of this bill, you chose to move forward with your political agenda. And that's what hurts about this bill, Mr. Speaker. That hurts deeply. And so this isn't a simple exercise in casting a vote that is yes or no. This is an exercise about politics, and politics getting in the way of protecting expectant mothers, protecting their children, and respecting the fathers. Respecting the fathers of each one of these children who were lost, murdered, killed. That's what hurts about this bill, Mr. Speaker. Vote your conscience, colleagues.
Representative Waller? Representative Stevens?
Well, thank you, members. I've thought so long and hard this weekend about this bill. I wasn't really sure why, and I went to my friends, Rep. Gardner and some others, about the issue and how it might pertain at the end of the day, perhaps unintended consequences for those who are in the infertility community. And that's a community that that's near and dear to my heart. Obviously, as I expressed in our second readings, for a number of different reasons. I actually applaud what the sponsors were trying to do. A number of years ago, we had this discussion that the most dangerous place to be is in the womb, due to things such as woman lives with boyfriend, it becomes an abusive relationship, she's pushed down the stairs, she's hurt for any number of reasons, woman happily pregnant, she's driving somewhere, hit by drunk driver. These situations don't escape any of us. They are very real and very everyday situations. I have been on both sides of this issue and found myself actually in an infertility support group with people who perhaps didn't suffer the outcome of the victims, let's say, of a Kermit Gosnell, but maybe not far behind. Infertile for different reasons, infertile due to bad practice. It saddens me that in this bill we don't really cover those things. We made an attempt on second readings to try to get this remedied. We actually tried through Rep. Waller and through Rep. Gardner to make this a better bill where we don't impugn, where we don't make the personhood issue the centerpiece given the differences of opinion here. But I can certainly tell you, I do believe with the wording of the bill and with the issue of human being versus personhood, you're on a collision course. It doesn't matter what happens here today. I just believe you're on a collision course. And my heart is so heavy over this because I stand with so many women who have found themselves in this situation. And yet I do not believe that this bill is the vehicle to get us there. And I appreciate, Rep. Foote, your heart in terms of how you would represent and what you would do. But I don't see this bill doing this. I don't see this bill providing for this. And having myself been part of the infertility community and still part of the infertility community that I hold near and dear to my heart, I'm asking for a no vote on this because I don't believe this answers it. And I can tell you, having watched my son, when you're an in vitro patient, it's a very different thing. You get to see through microscope everything happening. You get to see embryos at 3 days. You get to see a heartbeat. You get 3D. You're in the very, very high category of risk. So you're kept up with all the time. And having been with the best of the best doctors, I can tell you, human being, personhood, you're going to have this issue does not go away. It could have gone away in this bill had we adopted Rep. Gardner's amendment. We could all be on our way and go down that highway supporting what this bill is trying to do. But we can't, given where we're at today. And that makes me sad because I agree with Rep. McNulty. It politicizes, I think politicizes women. I think it's not okay. I think as a member of the infertility community and someone who cares deeply about life, and certainly also what the authors are trying to do with this, I just can't go there. And it's very, very sad to me today because I've thought so much about it over the weekend and have thought every which way. How do we get there? And I honestly, Rep. Gardner, thanks for your amendment on second readings. We could have gotten there. We really could have gotten there with this bill, but we can't. I believe for more political reasons, and that's why I can't support the bill. I think we're going to see unintended consequences with this. And speaking as a member of the infertility community, I see that on a collision course most definitely. I think personhood issues go to when an infertility doctor deals with embryos. I think it goes with every time an infertility patient has to do something about naming who their embryos will go to, should there be death or anything else. I just see this on a collision course, perhaps an unintended one, and so I can't support this bill. Thank you.
Representative Waller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Foote, I appreciate you coming down here and providing some legislative history for us. About bills that have been run in the past, about bills that have had similar sorts of language in the past. And you're right, I did. I ran a bill a few years back that had similar sort of language in it that you talked about. But Representative Foote, maybe you don't remember this because you weren't here, you didn't read about it. We actually pulled that bill from the calendar, and I asked to have it PI'd and killed in committee because we couldn't agree on language. That was part of the issue with it. And you brought a bill again last year that had similar sort of language, and many of us supported that piece of legislation. Didn't really care for that definition in that bill, but supported the legislation for this reason. It did go a lot further to protect unborn children than anything we'd had in the history of the state of Colorado before that. But now we're at a circumstance where I believe through the legislative process, I have come to understand and know why legislation is moving forward the way it is and why language is there and why it's not there. And I think, quite frankly, one of the reasons I don't support this language now is because of House Bill 1324 from earlier this year when you tried to make the definition of a person as referring to an individual whose death was caused by the wrongful act, negligent, default, means a human being who had been born and was alive at the time of the wrongful act, neglect, or default. That was the original bill. Now, the bill we're talking about now, 1388, replaces the original bill. The original bill had a definition in it that said, look, person is somebody who's born alive at the time of the act. It wasn't trying to be silent. Let's be very clear about this, members. The original intent was not to be silent on what a human being is or creating a definition for a human being. The original intent, as per House Bill 1324, was a circumstance where it has to be somebody that was born alive. That's what they said. That's what they wanted. Now, forgive me, Representative Foote, for looking a little bit more suspectly at intent in House Bill now 1388. I'm not calling your intent into question here. I'm telling you why I'm voting the way I'm voting. I'm voting the way I'm voting because of this original definition that said you had to be born alive at the time to be a human being. Now, they didn't get support for that, so they backed off of it. But it's told me what the true intent here is moving forward. And that's why I can no longer support this language. We tried to come up with something that was truly neutral. Representative Gardner came forward with a definition that was truly neutral, that said nothing is going to confer or deny personhood. That's neutrality. That's what neutrality is all about. Now, we've supported this language in the past in your bill last year. That's right. But that was before you tried to make this move.
Representative Waller, you have 30 seconds remaining.
That's before you tried to make this move to say that a baby is not a baby until it is born alive. That's why I'm a no vote on this bill. That's why I supported your definition in the past, because I believed what you were saying then. I don't now.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rarely speak a second time on third reading, but the sponsors of this bill have made statements with which I disagree about how you read this bill. When I struggled through law school, not once but twice, they taught me about damages for torts, for personal injuries. And I learned that anyone who receives a personal injury, and a personal injury of the sort that is intentional, knowing, or reckless, as this bill refers to, that person can claim their economic damages, their loss of work, their hospital bills, if they lost a limb, the decreased earning capacity, their economic damages. And then they taught me that you could claim non-economic damages in those cases for pain and suffering, for the fact not only that you have lost earning capacity for the loss of a limb, but that the disfigurement, it affects you emotionally, and there's not a way to necessarily economically do that. Those are non-economic damages. And then if it was an intentional act, a reckless act, you could get so-called exemplary damages. And those are punitive in nature. That's somewhere to basically sort of punish the tortfeasor, the person who committed this act. So when I read this bill and people said, this bill does more. It provides a remedy for that pregnant woman. It provides a remedy for her that doesn't exist. I read this bill and it said, a woman is entitled to bring an action under this section entitled to may recover the following damages: her own economic damages, her own non-economic damages, and exemplary damages. And I said, well, you know, I went to law school twice, took me twice, but I got it down pretty good, and this just says you can only collect what you can already collect. So what's the purpose of the bill? I don't know. I don't ascribe any motive to the sponsors. I mean, what does the bill itself do? Well, it has a lot of construction language about when an unborn child is a person or a human being or entitled, really ultimately entitled to protections of law, but it doesn't add anything else to the remedies available to that woman in Colorado today at the courthouse. It does not. And I've said this over and over and over again to the sponsors, and they say it provides a remedy. Well, I don't think that remedy for those things is in doubt. That's the common law, and that's the statutory law in Colorado. It's pretty clear. Now, some have said to me, well, you voted for the criminal penalty law last year, and it had some of the same language. Why aren't you going to vote for this one, Representative Gardner? You voted for it then. Well, one, I objected to the language last year, but I bit the bullet. I took a hard swallow because the fact was, in the criminal law in Colorado, we did not have an adequate remedy. It changed the outcome for the people of Colorado, and even though I didn't like what it had to say about personhood and about an unborn child at 39 weeks that's on its way to the hospital to be delivered, I bit the bullet because everybody knows here that legislation is never perfect, and that was far from perfect. But it did do something of which I approved and thought, on balance, we were better off. This bill doesn't add any remedy at all. I've asked that over and over and over again, and no one has been willing to say, okay, well, Representative Gardner, a woman can't get economic damages for the loss of her pregnancy. She can't get non-economic damages for the loss of her pregnancy. She can't get exemplary damages when someone injures her recklessly and she loses her pregnancy. In fact, Representative Waller, to try to add some definition to that, offered a definition of non-economic damages, and that was rejected as well. And so what does this bill do? What does it add to the law of Colorado? Well, it adds some policy about the fact that a child at 39 weeks on the way to the hospital who's killed in his mother's womb is absolutely not a person and never will be under the law of the state of Colorado. If this passes, that's what it does. And it doesn't give that woman who loses her unborn child any more money and any more remedy and anything better at the courthouse. But it does say, Judge, don't ever go down the road of thinking that's person. Your Honor, don't do that. Don't do that, because we had a case like that. We had a case of child injured in utero, born alive, treated as, and then died as a result of the injuries, was treated as a person. And that in the earlier version of the bill was going to get fixed, so to speak, and now they left that alone. But they don't want that notion to go any further down the road. That's what this bill does. That's what this bill does. It doesn't help that pregnant woman for the loss of her child, but it does cut off the remedy and make it very clear it isn't going to be the child in the ambulance on the way to the hospital to be delivered. That's never going to be a person. That's what this bill does. That's what, I believe that's what it's intended to do. I don't know what the motivation is, but when you read for legislative intent, that's the only conclusion I can reach, and I ask for a no vote.
Representative Pedersen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, this bill is about protecting women who are pregnant when somebody intentionally, wrongfully, or recklessly harms them and they lose their pregnancy because of those actions. As a woman, when I choose to start my family, if I'm pregnant and somebody injures me and I lose my pregnancy due to their actions, I want to be able to have criminal remedies and I want civil remedies. We're trying to fill the void in our current law. This is about protecting women, and I ask for your support.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1388 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representatives Giroux, Salazar, and Vigil. Close the machine. With 37 aye votes, 28 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1388 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1375.
House Bill 1375 by Representative Del Grosso, also Senators Talk, Drop, and King, concerning modifications to statutory provisions governing urban redevelopment to promote the equitable financial contribution among affected public bodies in connection with tax increment financing of urban redevelopment projects.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1375 on third reading and final passage.
Madam Assistant Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I ask permission for a third reading amendment.
1 sec. The amendment is properly displayed.
Nice.
Please continue, Representative Szabo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Folks, when we debated this on Friday, I realized that there's a divide in this chamber about things. We have two of the places, in our districts that are divided in this, the counties and the cities. And so as I was thinking about it, I wanted to see if we could come up with a solution to this divide. And so I would like to move L026. And it's
Representative Szabo, we are to
okay.
Permission to offer the amendment.
Okay.
Is there any discussion on the motion for permission? Representative, Madam Majority Leader or okay, hold on. The House will stand in a brief recess. The House will come back to order. Representative Szabo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thought changing a date would be technical, but I guess there's a, it isn't. So what I'd like to do is ask for permission for a third reading amendment and explain why I think we need it.
Okay.
So like I was saying, is that okay, Mr. Speaker?
Please continue, Representative
Okay,
Szabo.
thank you. So what I was saying before is there's a divide in this assembly. And I wanted to try to come to a place where we could make this bill work for both sides of the divide, the cities and the counties. And I realized that earlier, Friday, when we talked about creating the study, that there were people who thought it actually wouldn't get done or that anything wouldn't come out of a study. And so I feel like I've come up with a solution that could help the process. You can still vote yes on this solution and vote yes or no on the bill, and it wouldn't change that part of it. But what it would do, it's twofold. If you don't appreciate the bill, it would give, basically what the amendment does is you can see that it changed the effective date from January 1 to May 15th. So what it would do is if you don't appreciate the bill, it would give the cities and counties time to work out the kinks in the bill. If you do like the bill, it would encourage the cities and the counties to get together and see if this is truly the right decision and the right conclusion to the issues that they are having. And what it will give them the option to figure out what they need to do to tweak it in the next legislative session if it isn't the right thing to do. So the study would come about, but nobody, enough people, I guess. There were several people who liked it, but not enough people. But this would force the cities and counties to basically get together and figure this out between them.
Okay.
That's where it really is than just becoming a law that we do here in the state.
Okay. We're still on permission. Is there any discussion on permission? Representative Pabon, Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under Rule 33B5, what we decided as a body was that any amendment that was not substantial was in order. And in this case, even based on the request for permission, it is a substantive amendment. It is not a technical amendment. It may be one that many of us agree upon or not, but as a procedural rule, this is not a technical amendment. And so I would ask that the body find that not grant permission for this amendment. Now, just to preview what's coming next, a proper motion by the Assistant Minority Leader could then be to send this bill back to second reading, which is another rule change that we put in place so that we could discuss the substance of this amendment. And then if this body decided that it was appropriate to send this bill back to second reading to discuss this amendment, that would be a vote that we would take on as a House. But for purposes of permission, I request a no vote on permission because this is a substantive, not a technical amendment.
Madam Assistant Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I withdraw L026.
Well, why don't you withdraw asking for permission?
I withdraw asking for permission.
Thank you, Representative Szabo. Please continue.
And I move that we bring this bill back to second reading so we can discuss this issue. I think this is a good solution for all involved. I think it needs to be talked about more.
So is there any discussion on the motion to re-refer? Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm kind of in an odd spot because I oppose the amendment, but then I also have to defend my member down at the well on trying to let her exercise her rights to offer her amendments as well. So kind of a balancing act there. Members, I'm going to ask for a no vote on sending it back to seconds. Now, I do agree with Representative Szabo that she brought up the fact that this is better than a study, because we had lengthy arguments about whether or not a study was actually going to do anything. That, okay, we can study this thing all day long, but the reality is the cities have there's no reason for them to negotiate with the counties in any kind of a study. And even if there was a study that showed inequities, there's still no reason to act. And this would actually say, okay, if this was to pass and the cities and counties weren't able to come to some agreement over the summer or the course of next session, this bill would become law. But the reality is, I think going back to seconds is going to cause some issues. I think if we delay this thing until May for the implementation, that could have some other consequences as well. So I would urge a no vote on the motion to send it back to seconds.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before the House is Representative Szabo's motion to re-refer House Bill 1375 to second reading. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buckner, McNulty, and close the machine. With 17 aye votes, 48 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, the motion to re-refer House Bill 1375 is lost. We're back to the underlying motion to pass House Bill 1375 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives, close the machine. With 40 aye votes, 25 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1375 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Bill 168.
Senate Bill 168 by Senator Lambert, also Representative May, concerning the salary structure for compensating teachers employed by the Colorado School for the Deaf and the Blind.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 168 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 168 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Fisher and Tyler. Close the machine. With 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 168 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 183.
Senate Bill 183 by Senators Heath and Sheffel, also Representatives Pabon and Holbert, concerning increasing the maximum term of business incentive agreement that a local government enters into with a taxpayer who pays business personal property tax.
Representative Holbert. Maybe this time for a third reading amendment.
No, Mr. Speaker. As my last time as a member of this body, I move Senate Bill 183 on third reading and final passage. Ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 183 on third reading and final passage. Members, please give Representative Holbert the appropriate send-off to the Senate. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative McNulty, has all the members voted the way they would want to vote? Close the machine. With 63 aye votes, 2 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 183 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Bill 171.
Senate Bill 171 by Senators Schwartz and Jones, also Representative Tyler, concerning the ability of the Colorado New Energy Improvement District to arrange financing for water conservation fixtures.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 171 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage, Senate Bill 171 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Gardner. Close the machine with 39 aye votes, 26 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 171 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 152.
Senate Bill 152 by Senator John, also Representative Melton, concerning the standardization of financial transaction requirements applicable to insurers.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 152 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage, Senate Bill 152 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine with 63 aye votes, 2 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 152 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 173.
Senate Bill 173 by Senators John and King, also Representative Singer and McNulty, concerning the recommendation that certain persons be offered a test for the hepatitis C virus.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 173 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage, Senate Bill 173 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Conti, May, Navarro. May. Representative May. Close the machine with 46 aye votes, 19 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 173 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 11.
Senate Bill 11 by Senator Heath, also Representative Hollinghorst, concerning the Colorado Energy Research Authority.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 11 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage, Senate Bill 11 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Conti and Scott. Close the machine with 38 aye votes, 27 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 11 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 15.
Senate Bill 15 by Senator Kerr, also Representatives Young and Melton, concerning the creation of a hospitality career grant program in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 15 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 15 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. The rule doesn't differentiate between Senate and House. Yeah, that's the problem. Like, tradition is we do it, but in reality, now with a new rule, we haven't had this situation. It should. Is that what it says? The rule does not say House versus Senate. Close the machine with 51 aye votes, 14 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 15 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 151.
Senate Bill 151 by Senator Talk Drop, also representing Young, concerning the use of monies derived from civil penalties imposed on nursing facilities to fund innovations in nursing home care in connection with making an appropriation.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 151 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 151 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representative Buck. Close the machine. With 61 aye votes, 4 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 151 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 64.
Senate Bill 64 by Senator Yulberry, also Representative Salazar, concerning restricting the use of long-term isolated confinement for inmates with serious mental illness in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 64 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 64 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buck, Schaefer, and Stevens. Close the machine. With 63 aye votes, 2 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 64 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 130.
Senate Bill 130 by Senator Talk Drop, also Representative Primavera, concerning increase of the personal needs allowance for persons in nursing care facilities in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 130 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 130 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representative Stevens. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 1 no vote, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 130 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 144.
Senate Bill 144 by Senators Aguilar and Nicholson, also Representative Janal, concerning extending the Commission on Family Medicine support for the development of family medicine residency programs in underserved areas of the state in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
The House will stand in a brief recess. The House will come back to order. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate Bill 144 be sent back to second reading, general orders of bills.
Seeing any discussion? Madam Majority Leader, do you want to explain why? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The motion is so that the committee can consider an amendment that would deal with the funding source. It's a non-technical amendment, so according to our new rules, we have to do it this way.
Representative McNulty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I suspect we know which way this vote is going to go, but for those of us who wish to be more educated in our vote, what's the issue that, the funding source issue that we are being asked to deal with on second, in sending this back to second reading?
Representative May?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Because,
Speaker.
oh, sorry, Mr. Speaker. Woo, can I go home now? 'Cause it's
No,
already
you're
Monday.
still here.
So anyway, this is just to change the funding source to a more appropriate funding source. It also frees up $75,000 in general fund that can be used for a bill that needs the general fund when there's a better funding source for this program. And it's going back to committee so it can be heard. It's just simple. It's pretty simple. Second reading, back to the cow. Back to the cow. Go ahead.
And members, just historically, this used to be able to be dealt with on thirds as a non-technical to a Senate amendment, but because of the rule, we allow it to go second. We prohibited any non-technical amendment, even to Senate bills, except for the last 3 days. Representative, Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh. So you're saying
yes, Mr. Major. Oh no, that wouldn't be helpful.
That's next year, Mr. Speaker. So Representative May, so you were saying you want to send it back because you want to change the funding source so you can give the appropriated funding source for this bill to some other bill?
No.
Representative May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, I'm just saying there's a more appropriate funding source that is actually the Family Medicine Residency Program in which it should be attached to, rather than the Controlled Maintenance Trust Fund. I can't offer the amendment here. We can have a discussion on it if you'd like on the cow, if you offer permission. It's just as simple as that.
Is there any
But feel free to.
further discussion? Representative Gardner.
Yes, thank you. Well, I wish I had the Assistant Minority Leader here to assist me, but since I don't, I'm going to have to ask a question until she returns about how much money is there going to be left in the Control Maintenance Trust Fund? Actually, I withdraw my question. I think I can get it answered offline. Thank you.
Okay. Members, and just remember, if we do, this does pass, we will have the ability to debate any amendment when it's on seconds, and whatever the House decides, the House will decide. And then it'll get back to thirds if it passes. Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll talk to this side because they may know what's going on. Remember that controlled maintenance trust fund that we put together and the $10 million for each chamber? Well, this was appropriated not out of that, so they need to take it back to seconds so that they can run an amendment. Instead of taking it out of the general fund, which is now a different pot of money, they want to be able to take it out of that pot of money that they set aside for each chamber. That's what we're doing.
Actually, Representative Giroux, that's not coming.
Okay.
We'll see where it comes out seconds, but that's not, yes. Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, well then, we need to take this out of another pot of money.
It's all about
But I
pot
think you
money.
get the gist of what
I
I'm
guess.
saying.
I don't know. Okay.
Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before the House is to re-refer Senate Bill 144 to second reading. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representatives Landgraf, Priola, and Swam. Representative Priola. Close the machine with 45 aye votes, 20 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 144 is re-referred to second reading. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 157.
Senate Bill 157 by Senators Carroll and Cabinet, also Representatives Ryden and Nordberg, concerning the Commission report by the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs that examines the comprehensive value of United States military activity center in Colorado in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 157 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 157 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representatives Everett, May, Priola, and Swam. Representative Priola, close the machine with 63 aye votes. With 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, 0 absent, Senate Bill 157 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Bill 75.
Senate Bill 75 by Senator Baumgartner, also Representative Sonnenberg, concerning the registration of motor vehicles for members of the United States Armed Forces who are deployed outside the United States in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 75 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 75 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Del Grosso. Close the machine with 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 75 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 125.
Senate Bill 125 by Senators John and Harvey, also Representatives Pavone and Zabo, concerning the regulation of transportation network companies in connection with requiring transportation network companies to carry liability insurance, conduct background checks of transportation network company drivers, inspect transportation network company vehicles, and obtain a permit from the Public Utilities Commission making an appropriation.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move to, what is it? I move Senate Bill 125 on third reading and final passage, finally.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Zabo, since we're in the mode of amending third reading amendments of people's bills, I move to ask for permission for, no, I'm just kidding.
Now, I think you predetermined the outcome. Representative Pabon for a permission.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask for permission to add a third reading amendment. I ask L104 to be properly displayed.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is purely a technical amendment. It is striking the term authorized and substituting licensed. It is a more technically appropriate term to describe a surplus line insurer. And then line 3, it really is a technical amendment. It's just the numbering was off. And I do want to thank the drafter for catching all of these different changes that were coming at her at 100 miles an hour. But this is one that was caught. So and ask for permission for L104.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is to grant Representative Pabon permission to offer a third reading amendment. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Priola. Close the machine with 60 aye votes, 61 aye votes, 4 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Representative Pabon has offered permission to offer a third reading amendment. Representative Pabon, Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move L104. It's properly displayed, and I believe I've explained what the amendment does. Ask for an aye vote.
Seeing Representative Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm just trying to understand the difference between an insurer that's authorized and an insurer that's licensed. What would be an authorized in the original intent, and why are the purpose of being licensed?
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And really, it's more about what is a licensed surplus line carrier, and when we talk about who is authorized under the statute, we talk about a licensed carrier, and a licensed carrier has to be approved by the Department of Insurance, has to have been qualified, looked at their forms, met the appropriate underwriting requirements, all the different regulations associated with insurers. And so the license is the proper term here. Ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is is the passage of Amendment 104 to Senate Bill 125. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. We've had more than that, but. Representatives McCann and McCann. Close the machine with 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Amendment 104 is passed. Seeing no further discussion, seeing actual discussion, Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Speaker. Members, we had actually a relatively short debate on Friday night, if you remember that far back. And it was because we did have some good consensus around this bill. But consensus doesn't mean that anyone is happy, anyone is ecstatic, anyone is cracking open a bottle of champagne to celebrate the passage of this bill. It was truly a compromise situation. But I think, you know, when I first took on this bill, I didn't realize I would be working on an insurance bill and a workers' compensation bill and a discrimination bill that had something to do with transportation networks. But in the end, that's what it turned out to be. So I just want to bring it back to where this all came from. Necessity is the mother of all invention. And it was because of demand for alternative transportation options that brought us here today. There is no doubt in my mind that we are making history by the passage of this bill. But let's make no mistake, this is a new endeavor, this is a new industry, and this will not be the last bill I can imagine we will see about this. There are some things that likely need to be changed. There are some things that need to be amended. There are some things that, as we find the passage of time, will dictate that we need to change our statutes, and that's exactly how this bill came about to begin with. Our statutes did not contemplate transportation network companies. So I want to just encourage and remind everyone that this is not the end, this is the beginning, but it is a way to welcome these transportation network companies to Colorado, and I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion on the next waste tire issue, Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote on passage of Senate Bill 125 as amended. Representatives Duran. Close the machine with 60 aye votes, 5 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 125 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Members, we are done with third reading for the day. We do have 2 resolutions and a tribute to do. We are going to do the tribute first and then move into the resolutions. Representative Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you remember, we had an incident back in March where a trooper was hurt at the end of a chase by a pretty bad actor. Today, that trooper, Bellaman He Jr., is here today, and I would ask him to stand, but you know something? He got hurt badly, and he's not able to stand. He's still in a wheelchair, but he's down here. And I want to thank him for his courage and bravery, both in his job and with his outside of his job, where he does so much for people in the community. And I want to thank him so much for what he has done for the state of Colorado. Thank you, members, for honoring one of the people who take care of us every single day as an example of all the people who take care of us every single day.
Thank you, Representative Tyler. Message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker, the Senate
Remainder of the
adopted.
message from the Senate will be printed in the Journal. Introduction of resolutions.
Senate Joint Resolution 35 by Senators Sheffel and Jones, also Representatives Lawrence and Vigil, concerning the designation of April 28, 2014 as First Responder Appreciation Day.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House suspend the rules for immediate consideration of SJR 35.
Do you want to do the other one? Do you want to suspend the rules for both of them?
Yes, and then for SJR 30.
Oh, we didn't introduce 30. Okay, you were right. I thought we introduced both. Okay, we'll suspend the rules right now for seeing no objection. We'll suspend the rules for consideration of SJR 30. Correct? 35. We'll do 30 a little later. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Joint Resolution 35.
SJR 35 by Senators Sheffel and Jones, also Representatives Lawrence and Vigil, concerning the designation of April 28, 2014 as First Responder Appreciation Day.
Representative Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Resolution,
Senate.
Senate Joint Resolution 14-035 and ask that it be read at length.
Whereas first responders risk their own safety and personal property in the execution of their duties to protect the public on a daily basis. And whereas first responders are the first line of defense for the public against threats, both domestic and foreign. And whereas first responders stand at the ready to come to the aid of the citizens of the United States of America 24 hours a day. And whereas first responders are a vital part of our communities, not only standing ready to deal with emergencies, but also volunteering in our schools and community organizations. And whereas individuals, both career and volunteer, from police, fire, emergency medical services, search and rescue, and other organizations in the public safety sector, come together as a collective to aid the public in the event of an emergency. And whereas the governors of the states of Illinois, Oregon, Kentucky, and Wisconsin have issued proclamations designated September 27th as First Responders Appreciation Day. And whereas the city of Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, has also celebrated First Responders Appreciation Day. And whereas the Colorado General Assembly wishes to honor and support all first responders with an annual day of appreciation. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the 69th General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the House of Representatives concurring herein, that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, designate April 28, 2014 First Responder Appreciation Day. Be it further resolved that copies of this joint resolution be sent to Karen Renshaw, CAE Executive Director, Colorado Association of Chiefs of Police, Christopher Olson, County Sheriffs of Colorado, Ron Graton, Colorado State Firefighters Association, Mike Rogers, Colorado Professional Firefighters, Paul Cook, Division of Fire Prevention and Control, Colorado State Patrol, Howard Paul, Executive Director, the Emergency Medical Services Association of Colorado and Public Affairs Manager, the Colorado Search and Rescue Board, Sergeant John Hahn, Colorado State Patrol, Jackie Kelly, Jefferson County Regional SWAT, Fred Wegner, Park County Sheriff, the I Love You Guys Foundation, Tim Gregg, Tanya Silloway, National EMS Memorial Service, George McCulloch, President, North Fork Volunteer Fire Department, Patrick Smith, President, Foothills Fire Department, Randolph Winsett, President, Mountain View Fire Department, Ron Rule, President, Wiggins Rural Fire Department, Eric Christensen, Fire Chief, Fort Morgan Fire Department, Roger Holter, Chair, City of Brush Fire Department, Daniel Oates, Chief of Police, City of Aurora, Grayson Robinson, Arapahoe County Sheriff, Mike Garcia, Fire Chief, City of Aurora, Dr. Christopher Caldwell, Director of Emergency Medical Services, Denver Health Medical Center, Dr. Frank Lansville, Director of Emergency Medical Services, Aurora South Hospital, Tracy Lauzon, Director of Emergency Medical Services and Trauma Services, Aurora Medical Center, Patricia Tritt, Director of Emergency Medical Services, Swedish Medical Center, Denver, Michael Kehoe, Chief of Police, City of Newtown, Joe Rios, City of Newtown Executive Officer Captain, Ed Davis, Police Commissioner, City of Boston, Steve Abrera, Fire Chief, City of Boston, Bob Gann, Fire Chief, Wrist Canyon Volunteer Fire Department, Tom DeMint, Fire Chief, Poudre Fire Authority, John Hutto, Chief of Police, City of Fort Collins, Justin Smith, Larimer County Sheriff, Peter Carey, Chief of Police, City of Colorado Springs, Terry Makeda, El Paso County Sheriff, Kimberly Culp, Executive Director, Larimer Emergency Telephone Authority, Stan Hilke, Mesa County Sheriff, Michael Morgan, Colorado State Fire Chiefs, Brian Shepard, National Public Safety Broadband Network, Daniel Brennan, Chief of Police, City of Wheat Ridge, Shane Heap, Elbert County Sheriff, Edward DeVoe, Chief of Police, City of Waterton, Massachusetts, Jennifer Schaefer, City Secretary, City of West Texas, David Carr, Incident Commander, West Fork Fire Complex, Beth Lund, Great Basin Type 1 Incident Management Team Commander, West Fork Fire Complex. Gerald Durant, Fire Chief, Huerfano County. Greg Goodland, Public Information Officer, Royal Gorge Fire Department. Kyle Patterson, Spokesperson, Rocky Mountain National Park. James Englert, School Resource Officer, Deputy Sheriff, Arapahoe High School. James Mahler, Security Guard, Arapahoe High School. Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office. Gary Morrell, Fire Chief, Lafayette Fire Department. Joe Pell, Sheriff, Boulder County. Craig Fugate, Administrator, Federal Emergency Management Agency. Chuck Russell, Deputy Incident Commander, Larimer County. Ben Pennyman, Spokesperson, Boulder County Office of Emergency Management. J.J. Hoffman, Fire Chief, City of Lyons. Shane Del Grosso, Boulder Incident Commander. Eric Marsh, Crew Supervisor, Granite Mountain Hotshots. Ben Palm, Fire Chief, Yarnell Fire Department. Joseph Finn, Deputy Fire Chief, Boston Fire Department. Ty Trenery, Snohomish County Sheriff. Steve Harris, Search Effort Division Supervisor, Washington State. Todd Gates, Incident Commander, Northwest Washington Incident Management Team. Travis Hotz, Fire Chief, Snohomish County Fire District 21. Marty Whitmore, Public Information Officer, Ouray County. Lynn Paget, Chairperson, Ouray County Board of County Commissioners. Michael Farr, Sergeant, Denver Police Department. Bellaman He, Trooper, Colorado State Patrol. Mike Butler, Public Safety Chief, Longmont Public Safety. Bruce Goodman, Chief of Police, Louisville Police Department. Tim Parker, Fire Chief, Louisville Fire Protection District. Rick Basher, Chief of Police, Lafayette Police Department. Mark Vasquez, Chief of Police, Erie Police Department. Mark Lawley, Fire Chief, Mountain View Fire Protection District. Frederick Ryan, Chief of Police, Arlington Police Department. And Richard Brown, Fire Chief, Colorado Springs.
Representative Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, please be seated. I'd like to give you just a little bit of background about the history of First Responders Day and why it came about. And it really started with the hostage taking at Platte Canyon High School. And I think you all remember that, September 27th of 2006. The Platte Canyon High School hostage crisis was an incident of a hostage taking and shooting that occurred at Platte Canyon High School in Bailey, Colorado on September 27th, 2006. The gunman, 53-year-old Dwayne Roger Morrison, took 6 female students hostage and when he broke into a classroom door with explosives. Negotiations with Morrison began with the goal of allowing the 6 hostages in the room to be released. He spoke via telephone and used the student hostages as relayers between the negotiators and himself. He did not want to speak directly with officials. After 4 of the 6 girls were released, negotiators heightened the intensity of their indirect discussions with Morrison. During this time, 16-year-old junior Emily Keys, one of the 2 remaining hostages, managed to send her family a brief text message stating, "I love you guys." In response to a text message, "Are you okay?" her father, John Michael Keys, had sent using his cell phone after receiving word that an incident was occurring at the high school. When Keys' father sent the message, "Where are you?" he received no response. A total of 800 students for Platte Canyon High School and nearby Fitzsimmons Middle School were rapidly evacuated. Morrison's demands were unknown, although police confirmed that his primary concern was a request for the police to back away. All students except hostages were safely evacuated by 12:10 p.m., and by 3 p.m., all had been taken to Deer Creek Elementary School. Parents were able to gain little information from authorities who remained silent regarding the issue while the crisis continued. Sheriff Fred Wagner said that police had chosen to storm the second-floor classroom after the man ended negotiations, stating that something would happen at 4 p.m. SWAT team members witnessed Morrison assaulting the girls, and Wagner made the decision to save the hostages by force. The police burst through the door at approximately 3:45 p.m. After using the hostages as human shields against the Jefferson County SWAT team, Morrison shot at the policeman and then at Emily Keys, who was trying to run. Morrison committed suicide thereafter. Keyes was taken by helicopter to a hospital in Denver, where she was pronounced dead at 4:32 p.m. The other hostage survived with no physical injuries, and investigators found no sign of explosives in his backpack. Today, we're recognizing first responders for everything they do for our communities across the state and across the nation. I'm sure some of you might ask, what is a first responder? A person such as a police officer, firefighter, or EMT trained in urgent medical care and other emergency procedures that is prepared to move immediately to the scene of an accident or disaster to provide assistance. First responders include members from many agencies: police, firemen, paramedics, EMTs, dispatchers, disaster agencies, and even volunteers. They're the people you see running in when everyone else is running out. First responders are people who show up in the face of danger and natural disaster because they're committed to serving others. And in those vulnerable moments, they rely on three things: their team, their training and experience, and their equipment. I'd like to offer my personal thanks to the EMTs who came to the rescue of my son when he rolled his ATV and we needed emergency access out of a remote area outside of Salida. Those people were there when we needed them, and they are always there when we need them.
Representative Vigil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank Representative Lawrence for inviting me to be on this resolution. As a former peace officer and first responder, I've both been a responder and a recipient of first responders. When I had my accident in '77, I laid out in the backyard, quite a while before some neighbors finally realized that maybe something was wrong, and all the time that I was out there, you know, I didn't know what was going to happen because it was early in the afternoon. My wife wouldn't come home for a while. But when I first saw these first responders come to help me out, then I knew it was okay, that I would probably survive. And, you know, that was one of the worst days of my life. But I was so glad to have those first responders there to help me out, to be able to be okay, to go get fixed. But that's my personal part of why I'm so grateful to first responders, because they're great, have great training, they got great personalities to do what they do, because they do grim work. Believe it or not, it is hard work to do. But this year, in a year of rain and fire, where almost in every corner of the state things were burning, and then in September the deluge of water came down in the northern part of the state. You know, it was all these first responders that were out there. They were out there helping out people. They were out there working to make sure that those folks got the help that they needed. And I have a personal story here from first responders, personal stories from David Haskins, and this from the Rampart Search and Rescue of Adams and Morgan counties was called out by this. I guess this is the sequence that happened. Rampart Search and Rescue of Adams and Morgan counties was called out by dispatch September 12th at 2 a.m. to respond to the command post on Broadway Street in the city of Boulder. Dispatch also advised all but one road was impassable. The State Highway 7 was the only way into Boulder. The first several days, the roads in the Lee Hill area were under weight limits because the water was undercutting the roads, and only light vehicles like their 4x4s were means into Rampart Search and Rescue transported firefighters and their equipment to several locations which were unreachable by their heavy fire trucks. For the next several days, Rampart Search and Rescue teams were deployed and evacuated residents in the flood-stricken areas, going door to door. The next door could be seen several mountains away due to washed out roads and driveway bridges that were washed out. Several members were flown in and out by helicopter evacuating stranded residents and their pets. While this is going on, state OEM got the request from the Red Cross and Salvation Army, which help with meal deliveries and shelters throughout the state. OEM's Web EOC program resource Rampart was contacted, and additional members responded on the second front to help deliver meals to shelter locations in Adams, Jefferson, Larimer, and Weld counties during the flood. And just so you appreciate this, the Rampart Search and Rescue is 100% volunteer. Its members are not paid, and each member has a normal day-to-day job, and they took their vacation time to help during the week-long event in September the 13th. So these folks are also very community-oriented and very unselfish with their time and their resources. And again, I full support of Resolution 35.
Any representative, Madam Speaker Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank Representative Vigil and Representative Lawrence for bringing this joint resolution today. Because when I think about first responders, I can't help but to think about the tragic events that happened in Aurora at the theater. We had emergency response folks on the scene in a very rapid and quick manner. And I can't imagine what it was like for them to show up on the scene and to see what they saw. The resources in Aurora were very stretched because not only did they show up at that theater, but then also in Representative May district, they had to be at the scene because this person that committed this horrific act, and I don't like to mention his name, had doused the apartment with gasoline, and he had rigged it with all kinds of bombs. And so you have these ETMs that are just kind of rushing into a situation, not really keeping in mind their own personal safety. And so I also want to thank the family members too, because when you show up at a scene like that, eventually you have to go home. And you have a loved one there that has to help you kind of decompress and process what you saw. I just can't imagine what that's like. I also see a very good friend of mine here, John Michael Keys, who is the founder of I Love You Guys. He lost his daughter at a school shooting at Platte Canyon High School. And since that, he has turned his grief to create a standard protocol, a standard resource protocol, so that whenever there's any issues that happens in our school, that we have a very strategic and systematic approach to handling those types of situations. So I want to thank all of you who have dedicated your life and your career to protect the public. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to taking a voice vote? Seeing none, we'll proceed in that manner. All those in favor of Senate Joint Resolution 35 say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Senate Joint Resolution 35 is adopted. Representative Lawrence?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask that today's roll call be added as sponsors.
Seeing no objection, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsors of Senate Joint Resolution 35. Representative Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to take a moment. I know a lot of the first responders had to leave because we had kind of a long morning on the floor, but I'd like us all to recognize those members who remained for the morning, and also a special recognition to John Michael Keys.
Representative Vigil.
Thank you. And I'd also like to recognize some people that work to get those people out to those calls, and that's the dispatchers, who are the first connection to that call on the other line. Without those folks, it would not be possible for these guys to do the great work they do. So I just want to thank them for doing what they do.
Mr. Kohler, introduction of resolution.
Senate Joint Resolution 30 by Senators Roberts and Cafalas, also Representative Dorr, concerning memorializing the Cheyenne and Arapaho people who lost their lives during the Sand Creek Massacre, honoring their descendants, and commemorating the 150th anniversary of that tragic event.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House suspend the rules for immediate consideration of SJR 30.
Seeing no objection, the House will suspend the rules for immediate consideration of Senate Joint Resolution 30. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the Senate Joint Resolution 30.
Senate Joint Resolution 30 by Senators Roberts and Cafalas, also Representative Dorr, concerning memorializing the Cheyenne and Arapaho people who lost their lives during the Sand Creek Massacre, honoring their descendants, and commemorating the 150th anniversary of that tragic event.
Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, you can be seated. I'm not going to be too long, but
could you move?
Oh, sorry. I move Senate Joint Resolution 30.
Thank you, Representative Dorr.
Members, Sand Creek Massacre, being the 150th commemoration of it, was one of those tragedies, another tragedy I come up in Colorado to speak of which is a black mark on our history. And it's a tragedy that falls in line with a lot of tragedies that happened to the Native American population over the history of the United States. And the Sand Creek Massacre happened when Colonel Shivington took the United States Army and came upon the camp and really tracked down the camp of the Cheyenne the Cheyenne Indians. And it was a camp that the warriors had left the camp for the most part. There were not the warriors there. The women and the children were left there. And he took, I hate to say an opportunity, but he did, to take advantage of the warriors not being there and slaughtered women and children, which is still a site out in Kiowa County, of which I represent. And every year the Cheyenne will come. It's historic ritual land, so they will come and hold ceremonies there, of which only those of the tribal blood can attend. But it's something that, while there's a trailer there that the U.S. National Historic Services runs, as well as an office in the town of Eads. You drive by it not knowing that if you take a left at the road, at the highway, you'll actually run into this memorial site where this tragedy happened. And I was shocked somewhat to know that we really haven't done much down here at the state capitol to recognize this black mark in our history. And so we bring it on the 150-year commemoration of the tragedy, because once again, if you forget history, you repeat history in some way, shape, or form. And we do that. It's a faility of humankind. And once again, a lack of, so many often what we do down here, we can debate, we can have fights and wars, and the loss of life is because we forget that every life is precious and every life has dignity. And it's happened in the history of civilization, of mankind, far too often, and even in our own state. And that's why we bring this today, and I ask for your support. And if you would, I know looks like Representative Salazar is going to speak, but if I may ask just for a moment of silence real quick for the family members who continued from that generations on, but those who were killed in that particular site.
The House will observe a moment of silence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Dorr. The House will take a brief recess. The House will come back to order. Representative Dorr.
Mr. Speaker, in order, I think, to give a better idea of what this commemoration is about, and I apologize, I was trying to save some time, but I would ask that the resolution be read at length.
Mr. Kohler.
Whereas, on November 29th, 1864, approximately 675 United States soldiers under the command of Colonel John Chivington killed more than 200 Cheyenne and Arapaho villagers, mostly elderly men, women, and children, approximately 180 miles southeast of Denver near Eads, Colorado. And whereas, despite assurance from American negotiators that they would be safe, and despite Cheyenne Chief Black Kettle raising both a United States flag and a white flag as symbols of peace, Colonel Chivington ordered his troops to take no prisoners and to pillage and set the village ablaze, violently forcing the ambushed and outnumbered Cheyenne and Arapaho villagers to flee on foot. And whereas Colonel Chivington and his troops paraded mutilated body parts of men, women, and children in downtown Denver, Colorado, in celebration of the massacre. And whereas Captain Silas Soule, commander of Company D, 1st Colorado Cavalry, remains a symbol of bravery as he pleaded with his commander, Colonel Chivington, not to attack the peaceful villagers, refused to order his soldiers to participate in the massacre, alerted the United States Congress and the public to the massacre that it might be investigated, testified in Army hearings against his commander, and later was assassinated for his efforts to illuminate the truth. And whereas Lieutenant Joseph Kramer, commander of Company K, also stood with Captain Soule, as did at least 100 other soldiers, in refusing to follow orders to participate in the massacre, and Lieutenant Kramer also notified authorities by letter of the atrocities he witnessed that day and testified before an Army commission. And whereas the Sand Creek Massacre was a tragedy of worldwide importance and continues to impact the sovereign tribal nations whose ancestors were massacred that tragic day. And whereas Colorado Senate Joint Resolution 9917 added an interpretive plaque to the Civil War monument outside the state capitol, explaining the mischaracterization of the Sand Creek Massacre as a battle and the people of Colorado's struggle to interpret and take responsibility for the past. And whereas the National Park Service established by an act of Congress the Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site, which opened in April 2007 to preserve and protect the physical and cultural landscape of the massacre and to enhance public awareness and understanding. And whereas the Northern Cheyenne Tribe of Montana, the Northern Arapaho Tribe of Wyoming, and the Cheyenne and Arapaho Tribes of Oklahoma organized the annual Sand Creek Spiritual Healing Run in 1999 that begins in Eads, Colorado, and ends on the steps of the state capitol to remember what the Cheyenne and Arapaho people endured and to honor those killed. And whereas healing from such tragedy requires, in part, recognition of and redress for the tragedy, and efforts have been made both to help educate the public about the massacre and to teach respect for diverse cultures in order to better understand and learn from the past. And whereas educating the public about the Sand Creek Massacre and people like Captain Silas Soule and Lieutenant Joseph Kramer, who stood up for justice, encourages people to stand up against injustices now and prevent tragedies such as this in the future. And whereas November 29, 2014 is the 150th anniversary of the Sand Creek Massacre, and the state of Colorado recognizes the lives that were lost and that healing from this devastating event must continue. And whereas Governor Hickenlooper issued Executive Order B 2014-003 on March 17, 2014, establishing the Sand Creek Massacre Commemoration Commission to plan and prepare events for the 150th anniversary of the massacre that respect and memorialize the Cheyenne and Arapaho people and their ancestors, promote cross-cultural understanding, and educate the public about the massacre and the events surrounding it so such atrocities can be prevented in the future. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate of the 69th General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the House of Representatives concurring herein, that we, the members of the General Assembly, acknowledge the devastation caused by the Sand Creek Massacre and seek to raise public awareness about the tragic event, the Cheyenne and Arapaho people, and events surrounding it. Be it further resolved that copies of this joint resolution be sent to Governor Eddie Hamilton of the Cheyenne and Arapaho Tribes of Oklahoma, Chairman Darrell O'Neill Sr. of the Northern Arapaho Business Council, President Yvonne Fisher of the Northern Cheyenne Tribal Council, Governor John Hickenlooper, Lieutenant Governor Joseph Garcia, and the Sand Creek Massacre Commemoration Commission.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question, Representative Stevens.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I just really want to thank Representative Dorr for this. I think the governor's setting of a commission is a wonderful thing, and I think is healing. I have spoken with people from who have had their relatives who were killed in this massacre. And it is a big thing for a governmental entity to create such a commission and to look into always restoration and always an understanding. And so I applaud this, and I applaud this resolution, certainly support it, but also that we continue to remember how important this is and what a turn of events this was for the state of Colorado, and how we are going to turn that back again to make this a state of healing, of understanding. And so I really thank you, Rep. Dorr, and I also applaud the governor in terms of this commission. I think it's very important and sends a very, very important message to all of us. So thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, is there any objection taking a voice vote? Seeing none, we'll proceed in that manner. All those in favor of Senate Joint Resolution 30 say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Senate Joint Resolution 30 is passed. Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask that the roll call from today be used as co-sponsors.
Seeing no objection, the current roll call is made the co-sponsors of Senate Joint Resolution 30. Thank you, Representative Dorr. Announcements and introductions. Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House Agriculture, Livestock, and Natural Resources Committee, please be aware that a bill got added to our calendar today. It was last Friday. I think you probably already know, but it's Senate Bill 164 will be heard at well, given that appropriations is going to be meeting, let's plan to meet at 2 o'clock in room 107 instead of the regular 1:30 time. And then also, please be aware that Senate Bill 188 has been added to Wednesday's calendar upon adjournment. Thank you.
Representative Court. And Conti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've been asked to remind you that Rockies and Mets will be playing on Thursday, May 1st, and that we have tickets that can be purchased for $15 or less through Patricia over in the House 271 room. So anyone who wants to go to the game, all aides and interns are also invited. So there you have it. And both caucuses are encouraged to participate. Thank you.
Yes, members, we are just encouraging everyone to participate in this event and go out and show your pride and appreciation for the Colorado Rockies. Thank you.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appropriations will meet at 12:45, and we will go as quickly as we possibly can.
And members, anyone in afternoon committees, you will not start meeting until approps is finished. Hopefully that still will be 1:30, but if not, afternoon committees will be delayed until Appropriations Committee is adjourned. Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Education Committee, we will try to meet at 1:30 if approps is finished. At the sponsor's request, I will be laying over 3 bills, House Bill 1167, House Bill 1147, and House Bill 1145 until Wednesday. So we'll start this afternoon with Senate Bill 182 with Representative Peniston. We'll see you hopefully at 1:30.
Representative Ryden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members of State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. We have a very full calendar today. We are going to be changing the order somewhat. We will be beginning with Senate Bill 133 with Representative Melton, and then the rest of the bills will be in the order as they are on the calendar. Thank you.
Seeing no further announcements or introductions, Madam Majority Leader. And actually, before you make members, just to reiterate, today we will not be back on the floor, but expect the likelihood that every day this week we may come after committees on the floor. So keep your calendar as open as possible, otherwise you'll miss important business. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House stand in recess until 1 p.m. this afternoon, at which point we will adjourn until 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand adjourned until recess until 1 p.m. today.